Good afternoon or good morning. My name is Britt Parker, and I'm with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to this informational session on the Climate Program Office FY22 Coping with Drought Competition on Ecological Drought. If at any point you have any trouble with audio or any issues at all, please go ahead and type that in the question and answer box, and we'll try to take care of that for you. I serve as the manager of this competition and will be joined today by Viva DeHaza, the Executive Director of NIDIS. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Climate Program Office FY22 website, as well as drought.gov, along with a transcript and frequently asked questions generated through the Q&A portion of our webinar. This FAQ will be periodically updated with questions that come in, so all can benefit from the answers. We are holding this webinar in advance of the letter of intent due date as an opportunity to clarify the focus and requirements of this competition, as well as answer your questions. Our goal is to be as clear and consistent with the information we are providing as possible. We will take questions at the end of this presentation. You may enter your questions at any time in the Q&A box in your control panel. Today, I will briefly cover the following topics. What is the Climate Program Office? What is NIDIS? Important details about the NIDIS Coping with Drought competition. I'll briefly go over the application requirements, important dates, and then open this up for questions. So first, what is the NOAA Climate Program Office? This office manages competitive research programs in which NOAA funds high-priority climate science, assessment, decision support research, outreach, education, and capacity-building activities designed to advance our understanding of the Earth's climate system and to foster the application of this knowledge in risk assessment and adaptation efforts. The National Integrated Drought Information System sits within the Climate Program Office, and the FY22 Coping with Drought competitions are one of 8 different competitions currently open for FY22. Please note there are 2 NIDIS competitions this year, this one, which is focused on ecological drought, and a second focused on building tribal drought resilience. An informational webinar will be held tomorrow at this time, 1 p.m. Mountain, on that webinar and on that competition, and all materials will also be available on the Climate Program Office and drought.gov website. The National Integrated Drought Information System was authorized in 2006 and is a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring, forecasting, planning, and research at national, state, and local levels across the country. The mission of NIDIS is to help the nation move to an increasingly proactive approach to understand and manage drought risks and impacts, and to improve long-term drought resilience with a mandate to establish a national drought early warning system. Since its inception, NIDIS has been working with various federal, state, local, and tribal government agencies, as well as a network of researchers, academics, resource managers, and policymakers to support efforts to improve prediction, forecasting, and monitoring, and collaborating with existing programs and partners to undertake applied research and drought planning and preparedness. We share this work and collate drought resources on the U.S. Drought Portal. While our ultimate goal is a national early warning system, we recognize that impacts and information needs may differ across the country. So our approach to achieve this goal is to develop a regional drought early warning systems, networks of partners sharing information and action that help communities cope with drought. Each DEWS, or drought early warning system, has many of the same basic ingredients: OBS and monitoring, prediction and forecasting, planning and preparedness, outreach and communication, and applied research, but ultimately have their own flavor to reflect the needs of their region. These systems are not simply in place to disseminate forecasts and information, but to encourage innovation by integrating new, locally relevant drought information and supporting the introduction of new technologies that detect and communicate drought risks and warnings. In addition, we encourage learning across the DOs and value projects and approaches that are transferable. We currently have 9 drought early warning systems across the U.S., covering the continental U.S. west of the Mississippi, the Midwest, the Northeast, and Southeast. We are also working to strengthen our support to partners in areas such as Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands, the U.S. Caribbean, and other areas that are not part of a formal DOs. Information about the Climate Program Office FY22 federal funding opportunity, including the 8 competitions that are part of this notice of funding, can be found on the Climate Program Office website under Funding Opportunities. There's also information on drought.gov, and in the chat box, I've put these links for you. The focus of the Coping with Drought competition on ecological drought in FY22 will be on research to improve our understanding, early warning, and management of drought risk in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, to inform more deliberate and expanded decision-making that supports sustainable, healthy, and resilient ecosystems. The competition really has 2 areas of focus: improving our ability to understand drought impacts to ecosystems and ecologically available water, and integrating that information into decision-making. The second area is integrating ecologically relevant information to support drought monitoring, planning, and action. This competition builds on the foundation of the U.S. Geological Service Climate Adaptation Science Center Ecological Drought Initiative, the NIDIS Task Ecological Drought webinar series, which occurred in the spring of this year, and the NIDIS Regional DOs strategic plans, which define research needs and ecological drought management challenges around the United States at national and regional scales. For the purposes of this competition, ecological drought is defined as episodic deficit in water availability that drives ecosystems beyond thresholds of vulnerability, impacts ecosystem services, and triggers feedback in natural and/or human systems. And ecologically available water is defined as the amount of water that is ultimately available to ecosystems during a drought, and that is influenced by a combination of natural and human-modified processes. NIDIS is interested, as I said, in research around 2 major topic areas, and I'm going to go through a series of exploratory questions that are exemplary of what we might be looking for. So first, under improving our ability to understand drought impacts to ecosystems and ecologically available water and integrating that information in decision-making, we have questions such as, how does drought affect thresholds and tipping points of an ecosystem? And what factors lead to recovery, habitat loss, or ecosystem transformation? And what are the impacts of those changes on people and communities? Or what are effective approaches to assess and predict ecologically available water? Which indicators are most useful? Additionally, how do traditional measures of drought, such as precipitation and soil moisture, interact with human water use to affect ecologically available water and the structure and function of ecosystems? How should measures of drought be updated to better reflect ecologically available water? And finally, future droughts under conditions of climate change are expected to be more frequent, more severe, and of longer duration. How will those droughts impact ecosystems? Under the second topic area or focus, integrating ecologically relevant information to support drought monitoring, planning, and action, we would like to see questions such as these explored. What information, tools, indicators, observations, models, etc., is needed to better incorporate ecological drought into decisions at different time scales? How can tailored eco-drought metrics that integrate traditional drought indicators with ecosystem characteristics be utilized as input into drought monitoring and natural resource management efforts? What are the current limitations on incorporating ecological drought indicators into traditional drought monitoring? And finally, what are science-based approaches or considerations for integrating ecosystem drought vulnerability into drought, water, and land use planning? What information is needed to develop natural resource management strategies for mitigating drought risk based on previous droughts and future trends, including within the context of multiple extremes? And finally, what are the socioeconomic impacts of ecological drought, e.g. ecosystem services, recreation, tourism, fisheries, and how can that information be integrated into decision-making? Now, this may be one of the most important things I say today beyond the due date for the LOIs and the full proposals, but note that proposals may address one or more of these and/or other related research questions, but we are not expecting, nor should proposals address them all. Obviously, this is a broad range of research questions, much more broad than one proposal should be able to encompass well. So we do not expect you to address all of these questions. So now let's dive in a little bit more to the nitty-gritty of the competition itself. Pending the availability of funds, we anticipate a funding allocation for this competition of up to $2 million. Proposals may request funding for up to 2-year grants in the form of cooperative agreements with funding of up to $600,000 over those 2 years. We anticipate funding 6 to 7 projects, and applications should use September 1 of 2022 as the start date for the projects. Project funds will be awarded as cooperative agreements, thus ensuring a working partnership and substantial interaction between the project PIs and the NIDIS program, NOAA scientists, and other relevant NOAA staff. Projects will be expected to submit annual reports and to respond to periodic data and information requests, including quarterly calls to ensure co-production. Some of our most successful work to date has been accomplished when we work together with our partners, and we're looking forward to working more closely with our PIs through this grant competition. One of NIDIS's mandates is to disseminate drought resources through the U.S. Drought Portal, or drought.gov. To that end, where applicable, products, tools, and results will be hosted on the U.S. Drought Portal. Accordingly, all products, tools, and other deliverables produced via this competition are required to be 508 compliant in accordance with Section 508, an amendment to the United States Workforce Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So please pay close attention to the following important guidelines, as successful proposals will include partners and decision makers from relevant sectors and communities across all levels of government. These partners should be part of an integrated project team that will contribute subject matter expertise and/or who are the beneficiaries of the results of the proposed applied research to ensure the results are assimilated, utilized, and enhanced planning, early warning, response, and mitigation within the NIDIS drought early warning system, as well as nationally after the completion of the project. They must clearly demonstrate collaboration and partnership that will take place within the project team. This may include representatives from public and private sectors, academia, local, regional, tribal, and federal governmental entities, non-governmental organizations, environmental groups, citizen groups, etc. Proposals will also demonstrate relevance to the NIDIS national and regional priorities and clearly state how outcomes could be incorporated into a national and/or regional drought early warning system. They also must demonstrate support of diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice in their proposals, not only through the required statement, but in their project teams and engagement with partners where appropriate throughout the proposed work. There are additional considerations that are important. Research that provides concrete applications to planning and decision-making are preferred. This can include drought and water management, as well as natural resource management. Preference will be given to those proposals that focus on natural systems, for example, freshwater, coastal, wetland, grasslands, rangeland, forest ecosystems, and/or aquatic, coastal, and freshwater ecosystems, and shall avoid well-studied systems as well as intensive and industrial agricultural systems. Applicants should avoid single species specific projects. And we encourage the consideration of future trends, climate change, land use, population, where applicable to the research questions. Finally, applicants are encouraged to be aware of and consider integration of research results into our national and regional drought early warning systems where appropriate. The strategic action plans for each regional drought early warning system are available on the dues pages on drought.gov, which can be found through drought.gov/dues. Eligible applicants are institutions of higher education, other nonprofits, commercial organizations, international organizations, and state, local, and tribal governments. Please see subsection G under other submission requirements of the full Notice of Federal Funding for additional information regarding federal investigators or co-investigators. Federal agencies or institutions are not eligible to receive federal assistance under this notice. However, federal agencies can send their proposals to the competition manager using the same instructions and requirements to be evaluated by the same process and criteria. If the proposal receives a high enough score through the process, they would receive funding through an interagency transfer versus a cooperative agreement mechanism. I will now briefly cover the letters of intent and full proposals. Please see the full Notice of Federal Funding Opportunity documentation on grants.gov to read the full details and ensure you meet all requirements. In addition, please ensure you are familiar with the administrative and national policy requirements to which grantees will be subject. Investigators are strongly encouraged to submit a letter of intent prior to developing and submitting a full proposal using the FY22 Coping with Drought LOI submission form, which is located in the information sheet for this competition. Investigators unable to submit via this form should email their LOI to brit.parker@noaa.gov. If you email your LOI, you will receive confirmation of its receipt. If you do not, please follow up. The letters of intent are due at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so not local time to you, but Eastern Time on August 9th of 2021. The purpose of the LOI process is to provide information to potential applicants on the relevance of their proposed project to the competition in advance of preparing a full application. While LOIs are strongly encouraged, applicants are not required to submit them and may submit a full application even if they have not submitted an LOI. If an LOI is submitted, it should contain the following: competition name, tentative project title, the names and institutions of all primary investigators, a problem statement, a brief summary of the work to be included, including the methodology and data set needed or collected, approximate cost, and relevance to the competition being targeted. If these items are not included or the LOI is submitted late, it will not be considered. Responses to the PIs will be sent within 4 weeks after the LOI due date with an encourage or discourage from applying. So the final decision on whether to submit a full proposal lies with you, the PI. Full applications will be due 5 p.m. Eastern, again Eastern Time on October 18 of 2021. Failure to comply with the provisions in the Notice of Federal Funding Opportunity for full proposals will result in applications being returned without review. Full applications are limited to 35 pages, single-spaced, using 12-point font with 1-inch margins on standard 8.5 by 11 paper. For proposals that have more than 3 or more PIs, the page limit will be 40 pages. The required components of a full proposal include the following: title page, abstract, results from prior research, a project narrative, budget narrative and table, abbreviated vitae for PIs, current and pending support for all PIs, a data and information sharing plan, and a statement of diversity and inclusion. Other components that are not included in the page limit include federal budget forms, indirect cost rate agreements, DUNS numbers, and letters of support if you have them. Special instructions for multiple applications with the same project are included in the body of the Notice of Federal Funding. Please do not wait until the last minute to access grants.gov, as the process can take as long as 4 weeks if steps are not properly completed. The letters of intent are subject to a program-led review based on relevance to the targeted competition. Upon receipt of full applications, an administrative review will be completed for compliance with requirements and completeness. Those that pass will proceed to an independent panel technical review for 3 criteria: technical and scientific merit, the overall qualifications of the applicants. Each reviewer will provide 1 score for each criterion from 1 to 5. These scores will be combined using weighted averages to produce a single numerical score for this step. More information on the weighting of the criterion at this step will be provided in the Notice of Federal Funding. Project scoring at least a 3 out of 5 will proceed to an independent panel review for importance, relevance, and applicability to program goals, where each reviewer will provide a relevant score from 1 to 5. To determine the final score, the scores from the technical review will be combined with the relevance review with a weighting of 60% and 40% respectively. Before I wrap up, as I mentioned earlier, NIDIS is offering a second Coping with Drought competition in FY22 focused on building tribal drought resilience. Applications should be developed by or in full partnership with tribal nations to fund the implementations of actions together with research on those actions to build drought resilience contained in existing plans and strategies. If you are interested, as I mentioned, there will be an informational webinar on that competition tomorrow at this same time. You can find more information on the Climate Program Office Funding Opportunities website or drought.gov. Please share this widely with your networks and those who might be interested in applying. Finally, a reminder for where you can find the Notice of Federal Funding and the Coping with Drought informational sheet for this competition. Please read these resources thoroughly to ensure you fully understand the focus and requirements for your proposals. A transcript of this presentation, the slide deck, a recording, and a frequently asked questions based on the questions that come in through the chat box will be available on the NOAA Climate Program Office Funding Opportunity website, as well as drought.gov. Please contact me at any time with additional questions. We will now move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please type your questions into the Q&A box at this time. So we'll give it a few minutes and see what questions you might have. I'm not seeing anything yet. Okay, here we go. Let me just enlarge this box so I can see them well. So the first question we have is, can you apply if you are not located in a region with a formal drought early warning system or DEWS? And the answer to that question is yes, you may. We are not limiting projects or proposals that occur within a DEWS region. So you do not have to be in a formal DEWS. The next question is, can you please drop those links from the last slide into the chat box so we can copy them? Yes, I will. I will do that in a moment after I answer the rest of the questions, or if one of my co-conspirators can copy and paste them, that would be great, but we will get those out. And I should say we will follow this up with an email to you all when the recording and other resources are available online, and I'll also make sure that all the links are there as well. We have a couple questions on indirect cost policy for these awards, and I'm going to answer that to the best of my ability and also ask that you look to the FAQ for this. But most institutions, at least academic institutions, have negotiated indirect cost rates with the federal government, and we will recognize that agreement, and those indirect cost rates will be accepted for your proposal, for your project. If you have follow-up questions to that, please post again in the chat box, and I will include a bit more information on that in the FAQ. Sorry if I missed this. Do we need a draft budget? Approximate at the LOI stage. We know that once you fully develop a proposal, the cost may change slightly, but we would like an estimated budget for the project at the LOI stage. Let's see, the next question, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Let's see, here we go. Drought impacts multiple jurisdictions in my region, including international. Is it possible to submit a proposal that would help facilitate a coordinated response in the US and in Canada? So the way I would answer this question is, you could propose research where the outcome of the research may be helpful in facilitating a coordinated response, but this competition would not cover a proposal that for instance, would fund a series of meetings with the US and Canada to help facilitate a more coordinated response. So you could do research that would inform that response, but we would not be looking to fund activities that would actually, again, bring people together to facilitate that response. And yeah, so follow up if you have additional questions or if that doesn't make sense. I think the outcome of your research could help facilitate, but we aren't looking to bring together the two entities and representatives from them in, say, meetings or that sort of thing. The funding offered, is this for new business owners? So again, I would say that a business owner could apply to this research competition, but this is not specific funds to business owners. It's funds to fund applied research, as as we've talked about through this process. Great question. I'm a little confused. Are federal employees eligible? And so this is very confusing. Federal employees can be partners on grants. They can receive funds, but the difference is, while the federal portion of the project team will be evaluated as a whole, the actual funds will not flow as grant funds. It will not flow as a cooperative agreement. It will be an interagency transfer. So that's where the difference lies. So a federal agency or federal can apply. They can apply as partners on a grant with, say, an academic institution or NGO, but it's where the mechanism by which we transfer money that changes with a federal agency versus a state, local, academic, NGO partner. So again, feel free to follow up if your question has not been answered. Let's see. We are a small business considering partnering with a university and a retired member of EPA who does water research. Would you recommend we have 1 or 3 PIs? If you're equal partners in carrying out the work under the grant, then 3 PIs is fine. And I'm wondering if you're talking more about how money moves. So we accept, if you have a project team where multiple institutes or entities are represented, we can do that one of two ways. We can have one proposal where one institution or entity receives the funds and then it's their responsibility to distribute those funds to, say, the other three partners, or we can have three proposals that are identical except for the applicant information that form a cohesive project, and then money can be transferred to each of the individual entities. So hopefully that that answers your question. And again, if it doesn't, please follow up. Can you give some examples of what interactions with federal agencies or state agencies, local groups, etc., might look like? So I think it could look a few different ways. I'm not sure what type of institution you represent, but let's say it is an academic institution and you want to take on research around one of these research questions. If you have a close partnership with, say, a state agency who would want to use the outcomes of your research in their management decisions, or a local group, they could be, depending on kind of their level of involvement, they could be co-PIs. They could just be partners on the project. And if that's the case, we would like to see how you're engaging them through time. So it's not just, yeah, I'm meeting with them at the end to give them the results, right? It's they're part and parcel of the development of the project, you know, carrying out the project, and then taking the information and applying it. So hopefully that answers your question. Again, please follow up if it doesn't. Is a cost share required? And if not, is document cost share weighted in the scoring? So a cost share is not required for this grant competition. If you do have a partner and they are bringing money to the table and there is additional funds, that's great for us to know. I think it shows a comprehensive, collaborative team, and you know how closely you're working together, and the intent to carry out research that will then be applicable. But it does not, in essence, help you in, there's no scoring that addresses cost share because it's not required. How will the cooperative agreement work if we were to partner with a federal agency? So the same way. So I guess there's a couple nuances there. So in terms of how the money flows, the non-federal entity would receive through a cooperative agreement. The federal entity would receive money through an interagency transfer. But in terms of how we work together, it would be seamless. So the federal partner would be part of the project team. We would meet with them at the same, you know, interval as the non-federal partner. But it's just that in the end, the money would flow in a slightly different way between the non-federal and the federal partner. Let's see, would research that led to the development of a decision-making tool for land use planning be in scope? It would consider the water, energy, food, carbon nexus, and drought would have definite impact on this. I don't know, Viva, would you want to weigh in on this? I think.
Yeah, I also am reading this question. I'm a little bit hesitant. I mean, this is actually part of the process, right? To submit an LOI that would provide us the opportunity to get a little bit more information about how you're thinking about this project. So yep. Right off the bat, I wouldn't be able to just answer this question right now. I have to have a little bit more information, and it's probably outside the scope of this webinar.
Great, and I totally agree with that. And luckily, and as Viva said, that's the reason we have the LOI. We hope that it's not a massive lift to be able to put that together, but it does allow us to have a bit more information and understand whether or not the project would fall under you know, the scope of the competition. And I would just encourage you to, you know, to read over the scope and think through how it fits in. You stated that proposals will include partners and decision makers. What role must the partners play? Be full members on the research team, interact with the researchers only in developing the applications to planning and decision making? Can partners be awarded funding via subcontracts with the recipient entity? So I think I sort of touched on this, so hopefully you have somewhat of an idea, but honestly, the more integrated the project team, I think the more we like it, to be brutally honest. I think the research shows that when you're doing applied research, the more integrated the team and the end users and decision makers are in the process, the more likely that research to result in useful and usable information and tools at the end. We want to see that you're interacting with the partners and decision makers regularly. Do they need to be a co-PI or at that level? No. Can the partners be awarded funding via subcontracts? Yes, if they're actually part of the grant team to that extent and they're doing work in partnership with you, and your entity can do, could do it would be a sub award to one of the partners. That is that certainly is a possibility. So hopefully that answers your question, as well as some of the previous discussion on that topic we've had. I don't see any more that have come in. Is there any need for further follow-up or clarification or any additional questions that folks have? Okay, I am going to recopy and paste the links to the entire audience. So hopefully those just came through on your control panel. It's the link to the full notice of federal funding, the info sheet, and the web page on the U.S. Drought Portal, where you will be able to find all of this information. Again, if you go to the NOAA Climate Program Office Funding Opportunity FY22 competition, you will also be able to gather all this information there as well. And we will endeavor to get the recording and the FAQ up as quickly as possible. I know with just around a month turnaround for the LOI, having this information as soon as possible is helpful. The last thing I will say is please do reach out at any point to me if you have questions. It's Britt, BRITT.Parker@noaa.gov. I would definitely rather talk to you early on in the process and help with any technical questions at this point than wait. Any other questions before we wrap up? We'll give it another minute. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come in. Oh, here, oh, thank you. You're welcome. So thank you all so much for joining. We're very excited about this competition and what may come out of it. So we're looking forward to seeing your letters of intent and full proposals, and we wish you well and success in the process. And I look forward to interacting with any of you who do apply over the next several months. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.